And he's like, honey, I got to go. I got an asshole in my office. Hung up the phone. And then he started yelling at me and I started yelling back. And 30 minutes later, he offered me a job.
Welcome to Happy to Offend You. Life guarantees that somebody's going to be offended by anything that you do. In fact, somebody right now is offended by life itself, but they don't have to be. This show guarantees that someone is going to be liberated from being offended by somebody else's offensive behavior. What? Yes, we said it. This show sets out to prove not only how to be liberated from being offended, and also how to be happy to offend. So if you're already offended, welcome to the show. And here's your host of the very offensive, Michelle Nedelec. Hey there, peeps. This is Michelle Nedelec, and I'm super glad that you're here with us today because I am here with my most amazing guest, Walter. Walter, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation, Michelle.
Awesome. So give us a 5,000-foot view of who you are and what exciting projects you're working on or what you do for business.
Exciting projects. I think I try to help CEOs and entrepreneurs fix their sales organizations. That means a lot of different things. It's different every time we do it. That's what makes it fun and exciting.
Nice. Love it. So how did you get into sales as a thing?
Same way everybody else does, backed into it. I graduated from college. I moved to New York City 2 weeks later. No plan, no job. I knew some people. And somebody's like, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't know. I had a degree in economics, which qualified me to read the Wall Street Journal and understand most of it. So the guy was like, well, why don't you go into sales? I'm like, sure. How do I do that? So he set me up with an interview. A managing director of an international commercial real estate company.
Wow.
And I mean, I was like, oh, this is great. And I had no idea how important this was, but I show up for the interview and the guy was on the phone talking to his girlfriend. And he had me sit on his couch for 20 freaking minutes, ignored me. So I stood up as a 24-year-old punk and just kind of knocked on his desk and said, hey, Mr. blah, blah, blah. I'm assuming that I caught you at a bad time. I'm going to leave. I'll catch you later. He's like, what do you mean? We had an interview. Like, yeah, but you're busy talking to her. What do you want from me? And he's like, honey, I got to go. I got an asshole in my office. Hung up the phone. And then he started yelling at me and I started yelling back. And 30 minutes later, he offered me a job. You're
in New York when.
Well, but he assumed he was doing a favor for somebody, assumed I was a snot-nosed punk from the Midwest and I would get eaten alive in New York. And because I was willing to stand up to him at an interview, he assumed I could probably go have conversations with, CEOs about their multi-million-dollar transactions.
Nice.
So I literally it wasn't planned. I just was dumb and irritated and frustrated, and it's pretty much how I've led my life.
I love that because it speaks so much about the tenacity that is required in sales. I mean, you don't have to be an asshole in sales, but to at least have an inner asshole helps immensely. And it really does come down to not being afraid to offend people. It's like, I'm happy to offend you if you're going to waste my time. Don't waste my time. How do we get over this?
You don't need to wear it on your sleeve, I suppose. And we need to be, I look at it this way. We need to be likable.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need to be liked. At least I don't. As humans, we want to fit in. We want people to like us. We want to have friends. We want to have family, right? That's important. But when it comes down to, sometimes, right? Especially after the holidays.
After the holidays, I know.
But when it comes to sales, I'm not interested in being your friend initially. I'm interested in you having credibility with you, building some rapport, maybe getting to trust at some point in the future. But I have to be likable enough to get over that and get to the chance to have a conversation. Now, that interview situation, it kind of left the whole likable idea out the window. I was just irritated. And
Except in New York.
yeah,
I do find that they have a special sauce of they want to know that you got some backbone. That's really all it is. I don't care what your backbone looks like. I just want to know that you got one.
It doesn't matter if you're talking to the managing director of a commercial real estate firm or a waiter at a diner. They're not going to put up with any kind of crap. You're not going to waste their time, right? What do you want? Well, I'd like breakfast. Like, I don't have time for your jokes, dude. What do you want? Exactly. Right? And that, I mean, that's a little conversation you have with a waiter on a busy morning. They don't just tell me what you want so I can go. Yeah.
Right.
The whole New York second thing is a real thing.
It's a real thing. And I was quite pleasantly surprised when I was there. I was only there once. We were there during Hurricane Sandy, which was another awesome experience. But people were super nice, but don't waste my time. Like, we got something we're doing here. There's a reason you're here. And it doesn't matter if the reason you're here is to get breakfast or the reason you're here is to go and watch Broadway show. Like, we're here to make shit happen and happen quickly, which was also had super fun. I mean, it's like going to an amusement park. There's a different kind of energy and a different kind of vibe to it than just going out to the lake to go on a canoe. And that's kind of what New York is to the business world.
You have to cut to the chase. And, when you start a meeting, it isn't about, talking about the Yankees or talking about, the Jets, whatever, none of that. What do you want? Right? You can have an appointment and you've scheduled it for a half hour, but it always starts with, why are you here? What do you want? And if you don't get to the point of what it is that you're going to talk about and make it crystal clear, you're done. And, from a sales perspective or from anything else, just walking down the street, you're walking up Fifth Avenue and there's like all these, get in the way people, these tourists, looking at the buildings. Like, yeah, tall buildings, get out of the way, go over there and look up. We have jobs. We need to get to meetings. Let's go, get out of the way. And it didn't take me long to get to that. Some people don't, and they kind of get run over. But I've always found it refreshing. I've never thought of New Yorkers as rude. I've always thought as just being real. And then we have time later. If we can get past all this silliness, we can maybe go have a drink or go have coffee or share a meal or something. But let's figure out if we have any reason to do that first. I like that. But when I left New York, I went to Atlanta to kind of take a year to figure out what I wanted to do when I grew up. Yep. And wildly different.
Wildly.
Yeah, I was a Yankee, damn Yankee, but I was a New Yorker. And that was like worse. So I'm there for 2 days. I pull into a coffee shop in the morning, like a Dunkin' Donuts, to grab coffee. Bought my first brand new car. Get out of the car, and the guy in the big truck next to me opens up his door and just slams it into the car.
Oh.
And I'm 2 days out of New York, so I'm calm and cool and collected, and I'm screaming at the guy, swearing at him, right? And then this huge man slides out of his truck, right? And he's like, 3 feet above the roof of my car. And I'm like, whew. What? And he looked at me, he's like, what'd you say, boy? And I'm like, car, new, door, dent. Can I buy you a coffee? And he's like, where are you from? I'm like, not from around here. And he grabbed me like kind of like a hug around the shoulder. So we don't talk to people like that around here. I got it. I understand. And we looked at the car. It was no damage. It was fine.
Good.
He offered to buy me a cup of coffee, which I bought him a cup of coffee. But
so he didn't kill you.
He didn't kill me. Didn't threaten me. Didn't hurt me.
No.
But he gave me like a little piece of advice. I needed to downshift about 3 gears to my energy needed to match the energy of that town. And it's a different environment. But it was that was a change of pace. And I sort of miss the energy of New York, although the city has changed.
Absolutely. So let's talk about this, because I think it's a fantastic conversation. Think people get very lost in it. And lately it has been, you don't want to offend people when you go into a sales appointment. It's like, oh, I will offend people when I go into a sales appointment. I'm okay with that. And there's a difference between a cultural fit, if you will, or an energy vibe kind of matching and offending somebody. I mean, even on podcasts, right? If I have a host that's super flamboyant and outrageous, I will up my game in order to match, so that it doesn't feel weird while you're listening to the podcast. If somebody's really subdued, I become kind of more subdued, but I'm still me in
Right.
that whole transaction of it. And I think especially new people who are new to sales, don't kind of have a handle on how that all works. So how do you work with people that are new in sales to be able to kind of get the grasp that they have to be the authority on things, that they're not always going to, be their favorite person in the room, but that you want to create the rapport?
Well, that's a big question, and there's a lot there.
It takes 6 hours. We're here all day.
So I think most salespeople are awful, right? The statistics bear that out.
Yeah.
That 20% are above average, and then another 20% are average if you are generous with average, and the rest are just awful. So I think it's about figuring out if you have somebody you can actually help, and if you're trying to help them get better, or you're trying to help them just get a little bit better, or you're trying to help them out to find another place to be, because sales is difficult to begin with. It's really difficult if you just don't have the tenaciousness, as you said earlier, and if you don't have the desired, if you're not curious. I just look at it as a conversation that you want to be helpful to somebody, but you need to be honest and authentic. So how do you help them is to be honest and helpful. And sometimes that is like, your mindset is all wrong. You want these people to like you, and that's not important, right? So it's what we talked about before, being likable, and like that's a thing that salespeople have in their head, or they become emotionally engaged in the moment. Like, I gotta have this deal. And that, some people call it commission breath. Some people just calling it like being really pitchy. So you have to help them get out of their own way. And that, my style is more like a football coach, where you are really honest and sometimes in their face about how they're approaching it. But I'm doing it from a place where I know they can be better. I believe that, and I'm going to work really hard to get them to see it for themselves. But they have to pivot in their own mind, and they got to get out of their own way. And that's usually the biggest hurdle.
Nice. So when you're working with organizations and their average curve is a little askew, how do you tend to work with those teams in being able to bring out the best of them?
Well, I start when I'm working with somebody to sort of do an analysis and evaluation of 5 buckets. So one of the things that we look at is the salespeople. What are their strengths and weaknesses? Do they have the commitment and desire to do the job? Do they have the right mindset? And do they have the sales competencies to be successful? And no one's perfect. So there's always strengths and weaknesses. So we understand what that is. We have the data, we have some science behind us, and then we can share that information with them. It's like, have you ever struggled with this? Is this a challenge for you? But you're really good at this part, right? And so you have create that credibility with them. So they if they're honest with themselves, like, we can help you with these things, and we're going to leverage these things that you're good at, to be able to improve on the other pieces. So they need to be able to have some confidence. They need to be able to see the world through the lens of the customer, not their lens. We want to talk about outcomes that we're going to create and not be pitchy. So it's different every time. And that's what makes it interesting from my perspective. The salespeople all have same problems, but the approach has to match where they are. I got to go to them and speak to them. And sometimes it takes months to get them to move the needle. But once they start to see, oh, I tried that and it worked. Really? Okay. Maybe we should do that again. Maybe you do that more
It
often.
works so well, I quit doing it.
But getting them to that point is often the struggle, right? Because you hear, you don't understand my business, you don't understand this industry, these guys don't think like that. I don't know. Sales there's a lot of commonality across market segments.
Well, and I find that there's a lot of emotion and there's a lot of emotion in sales. Like, it's one thing to run a business and you have to make a lot of decisions and kind of get in touch with yourself. Whereas sales, I personally found to be much more of an emotional power keg, in that it either feel super comfortable in a situation with somebody and that's not right. It's like, oh, this is a little too comfortable. Something's going wrong here. Like, they're a little too happy. And then there's the, oh my God, I do not want to be here right now. Just find a rock. I can crawl under it. I'll be fine. And then those ones can end up being good appointments. So how do you help people to kind of navigate the waters of emotion while focusing on kind of, we're here for a reason, and the reason is client, not you?
So it's a really good question. And I think as a salesperson, we're supposed to be a professional. So we shouldn't be emotionally tied to this outcome, right? We should be this like psychologist looking at this situation and performing what we need to do to get them to go where they need to go. So I don't care if a prospect is which side of if you think of it as a pendulum, like if they're tending towards the happy side or to the angry negative side, I don't care. I can get them to go once they're moving. So that's why sometimes I'll poke them in the eye to get them to be emotional. But if they're just sitting there and emotionless, you gotta lump there. It's hard to get them to move emotionally. So I want to stay centered and relaxed and sort of follow what they're doing. But sometimes they go all happy, and I will literally say, this isn't going very well. And they're like, what are you talking about? Like, this sounds great. I'm like, I know, that's usually a bad sign.
Problem.
They're like, what are you talking about? Bad sign. I'm like, this is great. This is great. This is great. I'm like, yeah, but there's a problem. What's the problem? And then they start talking about what the challenges are, and then now we can deal with those things. I'm always looking to disqualify someone, and that's what we try to teach salespeople: is where is this going? Not to be negative, but is this person really worth our time? Is this person really qualified? Can they make a decision? Do they have the resources? Are they willing to pay a little bit more? Are they willing to carry the freight? Because sometimes, I mean, we get to a point where everybody's ready to go. They're signing the agreement. And then it's like, hold on a second. Let me tell you why this isn't going to work. And they're like flabbergasted. And then you hit them right in the nose and tell them, this isn't going to work because of you, Mr. President. Because here's what's going to happen. 45 days in, everybody's going to be really happy. And then somebody's going to walk in this office and say, this guy wants me to do this. And it's completely different than everything we've ever done. And what you do in that moment is going to make or break this whole engagement. And it's a cool discussion to have in that moment, but I can't be emotionally involved. I just have to be honest, but I want them to get all worked up one way or the other. But I love what you said about them being really happy. It's a scary thing. Something's that other shoe is going to drop.
Wrong. Exactly. Well, and I love that you have the system of being able to be the psychologist to analyze, because when I was getting into sales, they were like, oh, you have to be the doctor that's coming in and you're diagnosing their situation. And at that time, I didn't feel like I was diagnosing anything. I felt like I was going in and doing a sale. And I think the more is that people can work with people like you, especially right off when they're starting in sales, and being able to understand that you, as a representative of your services, you do have the ability. And the more that the CEO has, aligned with, these are our ideal clients, this is what we want to have happen. If they're not exactly that ideal client, then they might not be a good fit for you. And it's going to cost you more in the end than it is like if you just get that straight from the beginning. So I love that you have the systems in place to be able to help somebody feel like they are in that diagnostic position.
Well, the thing that you see often is that they start chasing people. They don't have good targets to the right people. And as you know, you've seen this every day. They're marketing to all of these people, and they're speaking to everybody, and they're not really dialed into that right group of people. And they could have 3 different targets. That's fine, but we have to speak to them where they are and about their problems and the outcomes that they need. So that's the company's job. They need to bring people in like you to be able to solve those problems and get that messaging right, and then be able to have the right conversations, be that sort of doctor and ask those questions. Because would you go to a doctor and it's like, hey, my knee's hurting me, and they'd be like, yeah, let's go do surgery next week, I'll get you scheduled, right? There's a couple of tests they should run and conversation that you may have, poke around a little bit. It's the same thing with sales. We need to do that. I heard a great line the other day. This is not mine, but it's awesome. Like, would you go to the pharmacist to get the prescription before you see the doctor? You need to get diagnosed about what it is what your real issue is, because it's not your knee, it's your hip. Your hip is causing the problem that causing your knee to hurt. So if you start working on the knee, you're wasting time. So if you don't diagnose all of that correctly from the giddy up, you're going to end up pissing away time and money.
Love it. Love it. So what would you say in your industry is the thing that offends you the most?
Training before you figure out where the strengths and weaknesses are, before you fix the messaging, before you help the salespeople understand that if they're a cultural fit, are we have accountability in the organization? Are we coaching, which is probably the most important piece. I've seen people in my space go in and do training, and they don't include the sales manager. And how is he supposed to know what those people are learning, and how is he supposed to coach it? Because the training isn't bad, it's just askew. So my idea is like, let's figure out what we're doing well and what we're not doing well. Let's focus on what we're not doing well. Let's get that corrected. Let's make sure we have the right process in place. Let's make sure the messaging is right. We have the targets right. And then we can train these people to do the things that they need to do. It's ass backwards most of the time. And that's why they don't get an ROI. And that's why they think training is just a waste of time. Yet billions of dollars are spent every year on it.
Love that. So where do you think people or businesses are most offended by what you do because they don't understand why you're doing it?
Honesty. I'm just pulling back the curtain and pointing at, this is the problem. Mm-hmm. And often I'm holding up a mirror, and that it offends them that they're the reason, and they, being a CEO, an entrepreneur, a sales manager, sales leader, could be a salesperson, but they have to really take stock of what they have been doing, and realizing that they're not, if they want a different outcome, maybe we should think about trying to do what we're doing differently. Not flip it on its ear and start over, but let's fix the things that really aren't working and track how we're. I mean, sometimes these guys don't even know what the salespeople are working on. They don't have a forecast. They don't have a pipeline. It's crazy. When you point that out, like, how do you run your business without a forecast? Well, why do you run your sales organization differently than you run your finances or your operations? Would you tolerate a 70% loss factor in your operations and your manufacturing? Would you be okay with the products failing 70% of the time? I don't think so. The checkbooks get balanced on a monthly basis, but we don't do that in sales because it's this big black magic bag of hocus pocus and nobody knows how to analyze it. And there's plenty of science that can be applied.
Absolutely. Well, and I think too, when I look in the mirror and somebody points out something, I've been taught that I should feel bad about the things that I do wrong. Therefore, when somebody points it out, it's like this got this pang, and it's like, well, I just got this pang, so it must be your fault that I got the pang. It's like, no, that's not what's going on at all. We're just trying to, make the vehicle run smoother, faster. And I think, like in Formula One, which we've some of us have become addicted to in recent years, looking at the car, looking at the team and how it runs, you're always looking at the diagnostics of it. And to your point, if you don't have the diagnostics in place in a sales team, you can't be tweaking things. And that's all you're doing is trying to tweak the system so that the car runs faster. And
they get in and out of the pits, or the tires are wearing right. And there's a ton of science. It's never perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that's part of the fun. How do we make it a little bit better? How do we, do we have enough fuel to get to the end, to the finish line? Right. If they don't have that figured out, they don't know if they got enough wear in the tire. Those are great ways to look at it.
Absolutely. So who would you say is your favorite audience to work with? Who do you love to work
with? A visionary entrepreneur who's been in the sales seat. He's been out there talking to people, and he knows, or she knows, the story. She knows how to tell the story, but they can't keep accountability in their sales organization. They're really good in front of people, right? But when it comes to the details and holding the team accountable and following a process, that person is my favorite, because they get it and they're like, oh, you can fix that part? Yeah, it looks like, well, I don't care. You can fix it? Like, yeah, it'll look like this. Yeah, I don't care. You're going to give me this information? Yep. Go. And it's like, I like the taste of sausage. It's one of my things. I like the sausage, but I don't want to know how it's made. I don't want to go to the sausage factory, right? Those are the guys that I like working with, because they care about the outcomes. They care that you have credibility, but they don't want to look over your shoulder every day. They want results, and if you're not getting them results, you're done. I love that. And then they also have a tendency to want to celebrate the victories. So nice glass of bourbon and a cigar is a good way to celebrate.
I love it. So give us an example of one of your Cinderella stories, one of your clients.
Client I've been working with for 3 years. He actually told me this yesterday, that he said, we would have closed down 2 years ago if you hadn't pushed us to change the direction and the way we addressed our customers. And I'm not good. I don't take compliments well, but that one sort of landed. Because I went back and looked at it. It was true, I think. But it's not done. Their people have gotten, their win rates have risen 23, 27%, depending upon the individual. But they're just doing things differently. They're doing the right things. To me, that's that's the win. They've grown. And yeah, we all want to get paid. We like making money, but the energy I get from watching somebody who just was awful start to be competent and then go from competency to above average, that's awesome. I mean, they may never be an A player, but now they can earn a living and they can take care of their family and they have confidence and they're excited. But I get offended by those people that have the skills and just don't do it. Those are the ones that if I care more than they do, I have trouble.
I totally get that. So I know our listeners are going to want more from you. How did they start their journey with you?
I think LinkedIn is a good place to look. Walter Crosby is on LinkedIn. They're going to find me. My website is Helix Sales Development. That gives them a lot of insight as to how I operate. I'm on LinkedIn more than I am with social media because I don't know, I'm comfortable. I understand it, but I do try to give people clarity about what I'm not for everybody. This idea of offending some people about being somewhat blunt, and it's coming from a solid, good place, but I'm more of a football coach than I am I don't know, the guy that's going to put the arm around you and give you a hug. That's not my style. But I'll pay a compliment, but you got to earn it.
Exactly. I love it. So good to ask, at what point in life did you know that you weren't going to die because somebody offended you?
It was in college where I had disagreements with just about everybody. A particular political science professor, he taught something. I answered his question in the final, wrote it up the way he did it, and then I explained to him why he was wrong. And he gave me a C+. So I went back to him and said, how do I understand what you taught me and then explain to you in detail why you're wrong? How is that not an A, whether you agree with me or not? And he's like, it's not right. Okay. So I went over his head to the head of the department, and I like, look, I'm not asking you to fix this, but I'm like, this just seems wrong to me. And he's like, yeah, you're right. Let me talk to him. So that jerk gave me an A-. He wouldn't give me that. But I realized at that point, you got to stand up for yourself. And just because somebody disagrees doesn't mean I can't be friends. That's what I've learned later in life, that we can disagree. I think a lot of that's gone away in the world, where you can't have a conversation and disagree on it and still have a drink or have a coffee or whatever. I think I was probably in my early 20s when that happened.
Very fun. I love it. Walter, you have been absolutely fantastic. Any last words for our peeps?
I mean, just read a book, learn something, try to improve yourself. And there's an effort involved in sales. I think just about anything. If you're trying to get better, you will, but you can't stop. You just got to keep trying.
I love it. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And I know how valuable it is.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Awesome. Peeps, this is Michelle Nedelec. Thank you for being here with us today. Be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your friends who, want to get offended, or they're just happy to offend you.